Jussie Smollett insists he's innocent after being charged with staging a racial and homophobic attack. But Superintendent Eddie Johnson says the Chicago PD has a lot more evidence that proves Smollett is not telling the truth. And Superintendent Johnson joins me now. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us here. I really appreciate it.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. A lot more evidence. Can you talk about it? What is that?
Well, I can't really go into specifics because we're past the bond proffer. But I can just tell you this, normally when we do things of this nature, all the evidence isn't provided up front. So there are some other things that just don't support the original version of the story that we got.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those things. You said there are additional evidence, but you can't talk about it. What about this whole thing about the check? He's saying he wrote on the line that it was for training and whatever, and it wasn't to stage an attack. What do you say to that?
Well, you know what, like I said, Don, a lot of these things will come out in court if it gets that far. But let's face it, if you were going to, let's say, buy a stolen car, you wouldn't put in the memo line, I'm buying a stolen car. So that's what I'll say to that.
Did the brothers testify or tell police that the check was for the attack, or was it for training?
Well, when you look at, if you read the bond proffer, what they said the check was for is in that bond proffer, and it was for the attack, the staged attack.
So let's talk about this letter. What about the letter? Because that was one of the first things you said during the initial press conference, that you believe that he sent it. This was the one that came about a week before to the set of Empire. The FBI says that is not confirmed.
Well, yeah, the FBI has not confirmed that that's their individual investigation. So any comments that we've made about it is from evidence that we've gathered independent of the FBI.
So this is from your own.
So they may in fact come up with.
This is from.
Yeah, they may in fact come up with something different.
Okay, but this is from. You're talking about Chicago PD's evidence. It has nothing to do with what the FBI has collected. It's two separate investigations. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Can we also talk about the Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx recusing herself? Why is that? Was there some sort of conflict of interest?
Well, really she's the person that has to answer that. But, I have a very good working relationship with State's Attorney Foxx, and I would just say this, that I'm sure she had good reason for recusing herself from the case.
So here's the thing. I mean, besides the question about why would Jussie Smollett do this, you laid that out in the proffer and from what you said at the press conference. But what reason, Superintendent, would the brothers have to attack Jussie Smollett on their own? Because if he's saying he didn't do it, then that must mean the brothers did it on their own?
Well, that's the only thing you could surmise from that. And, we have to face the fact that he still has the presumption of innocence at this time, and he'll get his chance to explain his side of the story. But like you just said, you wonder why would they do that on their own? They didn't appear to have any conflict with each other. So I think all those details will come out, when he gets his day in court.
I'm sure you've heard about this. People were surprised, and I'm not saying in a bad or a good way, but in the press conference that you were so passionate, so clearly upset. This was personal for you. Why is that?
You know what, Don? I've lived in Chicago my entire life, and I don't know if you know this, but I grew up, part of my childhood was in Cabrini Green, which could be characterized as the most notorious public housing project back in the 60s and 70s. When I took this job as superintendent in 2016, the mayor and I made a pact that we would do everything we could to make Chicago safer. And we've made a lot of progress in these 3 years. Crime is down. We have built up and repaired relationships in the black communities, the black and brown communities. So we don't want to lose that momentum, and we certainly don't need manufactured things to stunt that growth. Now, are we where we want to be? Of course we're not, but we made a lot of progress. We're 40% down this year to date compared to last year in terms of murders, 22% down in shootings, and those are important figures. So I don't want anything to disrupt that unless it is something that is something that's earned, and I just don't understand the nature of something like this, because it could really cause an issue in this city. You know, we've had issues before, but we made a lot of progress also.
And the numbers are going in the right way, and that right direction. That's a good thing. As far as Jussie Smollett, he continues to stand by his story that he didn't stage this attack, Superintendent. His attorneys released a statement saying Smollett feels betrayed by a system that apparently wants to skip due process and proceed directly to sentencing. How do you respond to that?
So what I'll say to you, Don, is this. Our job as police officers, not just in Chicago, but across this country, our job is to let the facts guide us to where we go. When we started this investigation, he told us that, you know, he could see through the mask that these were white-skinned people. That's who we were looking for. But the facts guided us in a different direction. And I would tell you this also. We classified him as a victim. We gave him the benefit of the doubt all the way up until the 47th hour of the 48th hour that we could legally hold those two brothers in custody. It turned at that 47th hour, and that's when he became a suspect in this. You know, our job is to gather the facts and the evidence, present them to the state's attorney, who then decides if the evidence is sufficient for charging. They decided it was. Now the next step is to go through the judicial process, and either a judge or jury will decide who's telling the truth.
And he did say,
so we just let the judicial process play out.
He did say it was white. He saw white skin. He said that to you, to police.
Yes, if you read the bond proffer, you'll see that in there.
I have you here. I just want to make sure. And again, you stand by the evidence that you have, and you said that you have more evidence than what you presented at the press conference in the proffer that leads you to believe that this was something that he cooked up himself.
I absolutely stand by the investigation. The detectives did a heck of a job, and I want to commend them on their thoroughness in that investigation. So I have no reason to believe right now that it's anything different than what we've stated it is. Now, when he gets his day in court and he's able to say his part of the incident, then we'll see what happens. But right now, tonight, the evidence suggests otherwise. It doesn't suggest that the incident occurred the way that he stated it did.
You guys are very busy in Chicago. I want to ask you about R. Kelly now. He left the Cook County Jail this afternoon after posting bail. He was indicted on 10 counts of aggravated sexual abuse of 4 victims. These stories of R. Kelly with underage girls have been around for decades. Superintendent, why is it taking so long to charge him?
Well, I think a lot of the problem is, Don, you know, even like for us, when we are investigating murders and shootings and things of that nature, you know, oftentimes we'll identify people of interest, but it ultimately comes down to whether witnesses or victims are willing to cooperate. You can have all the evidence in the world, but if victims and witnesses don't want to cooperate, then you kind of reach a point that you can't take it any further. So I think right now what you have with that particular case is people that feel like they were taken advantage of are willing to actually say something now.
Superintendent, I thank you for your time, and you mentioned at the press conference about the people who were victims of gun violence in Chicago needing to get attention, and we would love to have you back to discuss that as well. So will you please come back anytime and discuss those issues?
I'd be glad to, Don. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Appreciate your time.